AI is not just a buzzword anymore. Its applications in healthcare are delivering tangible improvements in patient care, disease management, and even healthcare administration. In fact, AI driven innovations are empowering clinicians to be more proactive, accurate, efficient, and helping them focus more on patients rather than paperwork. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Analytics Insight Podcast, where we delve into the technologies that are reshaping different industries, including healthcare. And I'm your host, Priya Dialani. The potential implications of AI in healthcare are truly remarkable. AI in healthcare is expected to play a major role in redefining the way we process data, diagnose diseases, develop treatments, and even prevent them altogether. And by using AI in healthcare, medical professionals can make more informed decisions based on more accurate information. Now, today we have a very exciting and a crucial topic to discuss: the role of AI and how it is transforming the way we approach healthcare, particularly in treatment planning, disease screening, early detection, and even electronic health record management. So let's welcome Chaitanya Raju, Executive Director and Chief Product Officer at HealthPlix Technologies. Hi Chaitanya, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Priya. Thanks for having me.
Great. It's a pleasure to have you with us on a podcast today, Chaitanya. And of course, when we talk about AI in healthcare, I think it's one of the most widely discussed implications of AI in any industry. And we have seen how revolutionary it has been till date. But of course, in today's podcast, we would like to know more insights from you, real world insights from your end, and how we are progressing and advancing in this field. But before we dive deeper, into our core focus area today, we would like to know more about HealthPlix. So, if you could help us understand more about the company, its specialization, or any particular solution the company is offering.
Sure. The HealthPlix was founded with the vision of helping patient health outcomes at a population level for India, right? So we wanted to build a company whose sort of primary focus will be improvement of patient health across the country, not just in the metros, but all over the country, right? Tier 2 cities, so on and so forth. And we felt that the best way to do that would be to digitize doctors' practice, digitize hospitals that are delivering care, and do it in a way that it becomes easy for doctors to use the software, and then overlay artificial intelligence and its capabilities on top of it that would help in improving the efficiency of doctors, improving the administration, so on and so forth, but then also improving clinical outcomes, right? So we felt that the best way to have that sort of a wide impact in the country would be to empower doctors and hospitals who are delivering care, and then empower them with very innovative AI tools to help with their efficiency, where they can see more patients in a day, but also with clinical nudges that would help them do better with each patient that they see. So we've been in this space now for about 10 years, and we have had a massive scale up through our technologies. We have today 14,000 doctors who are actively using the software on a daily basis. On average, these doctors use the software for around 4 hours, which is a significant amount of time for them to engage with any tool, right? That you can see in any industry across the country. We have roughly 45 million patients, unique patients who have received care on the platform, and about 80 million patients who've been registered on the platform. So you can see that already we are at a massive scale. About 4% of Indian population gets treated on HealthPlix, right? These are all massive numbers, and that's thanks to us being in this space over 10 years and building software that sort of addresses the needs of doctors and hospitals as a core mission.
Great. That's really insightful, Chaitanya. Thank you for that overview, and of course, with your agenda of making or improving patient healthcare all over the country is very critical, and you're bringing that expertise to solve some real challenges in the overall healthcare industry. Of course, it also sets the stage for everything we'll be exploring today, whether it's the innovations that you're driving or the kind of impact that you're trying to create. So, having said that, we would also like to know more about you, Chaitanya. You have come with a lot of a proven track record of developing AI products at scale in tech startups, and you have had leadership roles in two rocket ship startups that have achieved 10 times and 15 times growth during your tenure. So, could you tell us more about yourself? How has the journey been till date? And describe more about the role and contribution towards the company.
So I'm, based out of Bangalore. I'm from Bangalore, grew up here, went to college here, but then spent a significant amount of time in the West, primarily California, building out two AI startups. So that's been sort of my focus area for the last 20 years. For example, my master's thesis was on detecting um, deformities in spine in X-ray images, right? So from the age of 21, I've been in the space of AI and its impact on healthcare and other industries. I've also built out two startups, like you said. The first one, we built autonomous vehicles for the defense industry in the US. This was back in the day when autonomous cars were not popular, and so building out core capabilities that allow cars and aerial vehicles to be autonomous, the drones you hear about wars these days, the core technology that sort of goes into that was built by our company in California. Post that, I got my MBA from UCLA, and then took a leadership role in a startup called Medallia, which was focused on, again, providing AI capabilities to large enterprises, right? So firms like Apple, Vodafone, global companies would use our enterprise software at scale. This company, Medallia, went IPO at about 6.5 billion valuation, post which I came back to India with with the interest of building out startup in India that would then go global, right? I always believed in the Bangalore ecosystem, and I felt like time was ripe for firms to to build software that can then be exported all over the world, right? And that's sort of also been in the back of our mind when we are working on tools here. When we solve problems for the Indian ecosystem, you're mostly dealt with enough complexity where they can be easily sort of exported to countries in the Southeast Asia, but also US and Europe and so on, right? So that's sort of been my thought process as we build these capabilities out. In terms of my role here at HealthPlix, of course, at the roles that we are in, we sort of play multiple roles, wear multiple hats. I've been primarily focused on building out the product and tech capabilities, to sort of make sure that these products can scale to our users. But my true passion lies in AI, and my focus has been on building out these tools and capabilities that help doctors, help patients, help hospitals, because ultimately AI has to sort of can't be an academic exercise, right? Can't be some capability that exists, but ultimately you have to think about how these capabilities can help a user solve a certain problem, right? Whether it's a doctor, patient, and so on. So that's been my focus area. How do I apply AI to in a way that benefits our customers, our healthcare ecosystem in India, and that's been my primary role at HealthPlix.
Definitely. It's always fascinating to hear how leadership roles like yours can contribute larger mission of a company, and it's also a great reminder that it's not just about having a great product or service, but it's also about the people behind it, the driving force, and how they're driving the vision forward every day. So thank you so much for sharing that, Chaitanya. Now let's begin with how AI is playing a pivotal role in transforming treatment planning and disease screening. Now, traditionally, treatment planning has been a very complex process because it's based on patient data, medical guidelines, and also based on a judgment of a clinician. However, AI is enhancing this by analyzing vast data sets from medical records to genetic information and eventually recommend personalized treatment options for patients. So we want to understand from you, how do you think AI is, transforming treatment planning and disease screening, and what role HealthPlix is playing here?
At the core of it, for AI to play a role in treatment planning, in disease screening, and so on, at the core of it, it's important that the doctor's practice is digitized, right? So that's sort of the foundation layer that needs to happen for these capabilities to kick in, right? So, for example, if a doctor is seeing a patient, AI cannot work in as a black box, right? It needs to understand who the patient is, what the patient history is, what medical treatments the doctor is thinking about, so on and so forth, and all that can happen only if the doctor is using the software, right? So for us, that sort of forms the core sort of foundation layer that needs to exist, right? And so we have worked very hard in building out that layer and scaling it up. Once you do that, you need to also make sure that the data that gets captured is sanitized and is cleaned up to a point where it can be utilized to train models, to build out complex AI models and so on, right? So that's another sort of a foundational layer, right? So these are all, it sort of seems like basic work, but it is super critical to get it right, because data, we always talk about how garbage in, garbage out, right? So if the data that models are getting in is not clean, it's not accurate, uh, AI is not super helpful, right? So that's the second piece. Now, once you do these two things, the benefit you'll have is you'll have data on patients, sort of longitudinal journeys, right? Chronic patients seeing doctors multiple times. Each time the doctor is making a lot of decisions around the treatment of the patient. Um, and patient typically comes with test reports. It could happen, the testing can happen in the clinic, but it could also happen outside. They come in with sort of test reports. Those need to be also fed into the data, into the software, and so on, right? So AI helps there in that, our OCR model, it can simply scan a report. It could be, 20-page report. It could be a X-ray. It could be anything. So we can simply scan those reports and automatically digest the information and make it available for the doctor to diagnose, right? So that's again a significant value add. And once you have all these pieces of data, the doctor's prescription, patient history, test reports, all this information available, it is important to then nudge the doctor at the right time, right? So oftentimes, if AI is presented to the doctor in isolation, it doesn't really help the doctor. So what we are able to do is, at the point of care, when a specific patient is in front of the doctor, we are able to nudge him with information that is relevant for that patient, right? So AI can do this, and that's where we can go a long way in helping disease screening and early detection and so on, right? So let's take one very simple example. Typically, patients who have diabetes and hypertension, about 5% of them, over a long period of time, about 5% of them end up having chronic kidney disease, right? Kidney disease is where the kidney starts to struggle because of the sort of comorbidities that exist in the body, diabetes, sugar levels going up, so on and so forth, right? So this happens. The challenge that doctor faces is when he's seeing 30, 40, 50 patients a day, it's hard for him to understand who's sort of progressing towards that, and which of these patients that he should be testing, right? So that's super hard. What we have done is we've built an AI model that will ingest, by the way, we have close to 120 million prescriptions on the platform, right? So we built a model using these prescriptions data. Of course, everything is anonymized and de-identified, so nobody knows who these patients are and so on. But we have built models where when the patient is in front of the doctor, the model looks at the patient history, looks at the doctor's test reports that the doctor has uploaded or the patient has uploaded, looks at all the information available, and then nudges the doctor about a certain likelihood of this patient getting a chronic kidney disease, right? So these 5% of patients who are likely to progress towards that, we're able to catch this problem about 180 days before it would typically play out, right? So it's early. And so we nudge the doctor that this patient is at a high risk for CKD. Do you want to give him a kidney function test, right? So the doctor then gives that test. And we have seen that about 85% of the time the doctor gives that test based on our nudge, the patient actually ends up having a kidney problem, right? And that you're caught it early, about 180 days earlier than it would have happened otherwise. Right. So this is a massive impact on patient health because for a patient, this is a difference between having a kidney replacement down the road versus sort of managing the problem by early detection, right? So we're able to prevent transplants in this fashion by nudging the doctor when that patient is in front of the doctor, right? So that's super critical. So the decision burden of the doctor is greatly managed because you're not throwing a bunch of information at him. You're nudging him when it's relevant for the patient in front of him. That's super helpful. And then, of course, for the patient, the health outcome is obvious, right? So we are very proud to sort of declare that we have prevented anywhere between 5 to 10,000 kidney transplants uh, in the country, right? Which is massive because these are life and death questions for patients, right? So this is one example where being able to collect all this information using the AI models to do the early detection or the risk assessment, but ultimately nudging the doctor with that right information and empowering the doctor to sort of then make the calls that he would make has led to this sort of a patient impact, right? So this of course we have spoken about chronic kidney disease, but this plays out with liver functioning as well, with thyroid, so on and so forth, right? So a lot of chronic problems can be caught early in this fashion. And we don't think of AI here as a tool to diagnose, right? It's a tool to support the doctor with the right information at the right time, so that the doctor can then make that decision for his patient, right? So that's how we think about it. About 25% of the time, when we nudge the doctor with this sort of information, the doctor is super excited to accept that nudge on the software, right? So that we believe is great validation of the tools we have built to empower doctors.
Definitely, that's a really insightful perspective, and thank you for helping our listeners understand with the help of the example that you shared. And I think it's really interesting to think about how AI is shifting from being just a support tool to also actually becoming an active participant in decision-making process alongside, the doctors and healthcare professionals. And as you were speaking, I couldn't help but think about how this has a potential to reshape the doctor-patient dynamic too. It kind of makes it more tailored, more data backed, and it also builds a whole new layer of trust in the entire process. So and that's such a very critical part of healthcare, because for patients it, more clarity reduces their anxiety and stress when they come to visit a doctor. So when you're talking about the patient and doctor dynamic, the dynamics and the conversations that they have, I think AI is also helping doctors with enhancing the electronic health records adoption and reducing the administrative burden. And I think it's an area that's often overlooked, but it is critically important for the daily lives of healthcare providers, because physicians and clinicians, they spend an enormous amount of time inputting data into the EHRs, and this administrative burden can lead to more burnout and even reduce the face-to-face interactions with patients. And I believe AI is kind of playing an important role here as well. So we want to understand from you, how can clinicians can dedicate more time to patient care and less time to paperwork with AI being in the picture, and also how AI driven voice technology is helping them reduce their admin burden.
Absolutely. I think Priya, you hit the nail on the head when you spoke about the burden on the doctor, right? If you sort of think about the life of a doctor, right? If you're a good doctor with a big practice, in India, oftentimes you'll see the doctor is, has long lines outside, right? Patients stand waiting outside for long periods of time. And the doctor is trying to sort of treat all these patients, right? Typically, good doctor can even see, 35 to even 60 patients a day, right? And that's the need of our sort of ecosystem, right? So we have our doctor to patient ratio is significantly lower than what WHO recommends, right? So this is the problem. So good doctors will end up seeing a lot of patients, and to burden them with additional work of writing prescriptions and collecting all this information, while it's the right thing to do, it is, it sometimes seems very unreasonable for the doctor, right, to be able to do all of that. And we understand that, right? So when we built our EHR and we have been sort of innovating on it, our mantra has always been, don't expect the doctor to sort of come to the software and work with how the software is built. The software has to go to where the doctor is, right? In terms of what his preferences are, how he likes to practice, how much can you adapt the software to that individual doctor's practice. The more you do that, the more likely that the doctor is going to use the software, right? So at the core of it, that is super critical to have a very doctor first mindset and help the doctors with using the software rather than sort of expecting them to do all the paperwork at the end of the day, right? So if you look at our core software itself, we have built a lot of tools there to help with doctor efficiency. For example, when the doctor is trying to write a medication in the software learns the sort of typical preferences of the doctor, what sort of medications he gives for what patient, and so on, and the recommendations, just like how you would have in Google search, right? So the recommendations show up there, and so doctor is able to write a prescription within 30 to 50 seconds by just clicking through, about 10 times, right? So a full prescription can be written very, very quickly by the doctor once the software has learned the preferences of the doctor, right? So that adds and that builds into the efficiency of the doctor's practice. Typically, after using our software, doctor is able to see 20% more patients because he just has that much more time per patient, right? That's one piece. Second piece is, the voice to text that you spoke about, right? While there are a lot of doctors who already use the software, our belief is that we have to continuously disrupt our own space. We have to keep innovating and making it easier and easier for doctors to use software. So what we have come up is with a product called Halo. Essentially, it is a software that can listen into a patient-doctor conversation and automatically convert that conversation into summary for the doctor and a prescription for the patient, right? So this happens in a fully automated way as the doctor is having the conversation with the patient. So what this means is now the doctor doesn't have to key in any information anymore. Even the clicks we talked about earlier is not necessary. The software will listen to the patient-doctor conversation and convert it into a prescription that's relevant for the patient, right? And this works superbly well in terms of capturing, detailed and nuanced patient history because patient is talking about it in the conversation with the doctor. So you get a very in-depth sort of a good quality prescription with all the relevant information captured without doctor having to do any of this work, right? All the doctor has to do at the end is to review the prescription and make sure that there are places where we sort of highlight and say this is where the doctor needs to review it. He does like a 10-second review and he's done, right? So it's that simple for the doctor to use. And if you think about the innovation that we have brought to the table here, it's remarkable, right? Because a doctor sitting with the patient in the Indian context, firstly, they're speaking multiple languages, right? So they're switching, often between languages. There is a lot of noise in the background. There are people walking in and out of the room. So there is noise from third parties there. There's often traffic in the background. So we are able to very seamlessly do the voice to text conversion despite all that background noise and background context that exists in the Indian ecosystem, right? So I'll give an example. We have a doctor who loves the software, but she sits with two other doctors in the same room. So simultaneously that three doctors are practicing in the same room, and the software is able to sort of only capture the nodes for this doctor patient conversation and ignore the other two, right? So it works that way. So AI has helped us in a big way solving for this. We sit on again rich data set, both voice and prescription data, like I spoke about earlier, that allows us to build these models that work so well in the Indian context, right? So that is the product we have launched, and we're seeing very good traction for it. And the sort of very cool thing about it is that it can be then taken beyond OPD into the IPD and other aspects of hospitals as well.
Right, definitely. That's pretty impressive, Chaitanya. And I think what stands out in this discussion is not just the efficiency factor, but the human impact behind it. Because ultimately, whenever we are making use of any technology, I think it's giving more priority to the professionals. Because when we give healthcare professionals a time back, I think that's when they can truly focus on what matters, which is patient care. And of course, these kinds of tools and solutions aren't just operational improvements. I think they're very critical to workforce well-being, specifically when we are talking about the burnout in the medical profession. So, when we're talking about burnout, I think that's one of the challenges that we are kind of facing in the healthcare industry, and how different technologies are playing. But I guess whenever we are talking about any technology or a new business model or even cultural shifts, we often focus on the success, the achievements, the highlights, but the truth, the real learning, I think the part that shapes leaders and organizations usually happens in the hard moments, in the hurdles that test patience, creativity, and resilience. So, what are some of the key challenges that you have faced along the way, Chaitanya, specifically with the implementation of AI in healthcare, and how did you work through them? And I'm kind of combining two questions together. And how do you see the future ahead in terms of AI in healthcare?
So, to begin with, right, what are the challenges? One is, of course, the like we spoke about, right? The doctors are busy and they're going through a lot, and for them to start using the software, it's not straightforward, right? So, um, sort of bridging that gap of where the doctor is with very good software. I mean, that's a challenge in itself, which we spoke about already. And so that's something that we have to sort of overcome on a regular basis, right? Getting doctors on board. Despite all the capabilities, it is a challenge, and that's a challenge that we are happy to sort of face on a regular basis. Now, what has happened though is, post COVID, while there was a lot of interest in health tech, and a lot of companies came in with building their capabilities and trying to help doctors and hospitals and so on. There was basically a lot of noise in the market, and also there were a lot of, let's say, not so good practices, right, with patient data being used for commercial purposes, and a lot of other things, right? So there's a trust deficit that has sort of been established in the market towards health tech, right? And that is something that we have to constantly overcome. And so, from day one for us, it's always been about putting doctor first, making sure the data is secure, it's safe. Nobody has access to private PII information. The AI models only get to see the anonymized data, right? No real data getting used. So there are a lot of best practices we had to put in place over a long period of time, and build a track record of trust with doctors, right? So the trust deficit is a challenge that we faced, and then we sort of overcame it by building a sort of a very reliable and trustworthy software, and a company, right? And that's super important in health tech, because you're dealing with people's health, right? So the moment somebody's data is lost, it sort of throws up all sorts of red flags, and rightly so, right? So that is something that we have dealt with. We have solved for it, right? We are HIPAA compliant. We're compliant with global data standards, and we do that to continue to gain doctors' trust. The third piece is around the continuous improvement that we need to do with the software, right? So AI is getting better, which means we are able to disrupt ourselves on a regular basis to make it easier and easier for doctors, patients, hospitals to use the software. But it is a challenge in sort of, it's not like you can build and then all the 8 lakh doctors in the country use it, right? So we need to keep innovating, keep making it easier, getting into new specialties, oncology, so on and so forth. Um, and so that is again the challenge of a very complex ecosystem that we live in, and that is something that we overcome on a regular basis, right? So some of the, while the challenge exists, the vision sort of keeps us super excited. We get super excited to have the kind of outcomes that we talked about, right? Patients having more than uh, 10,000 kidney transplants prevented. That sort of an impact is something that excites us, that keeps us going. But it's a complex ecosystem that we operate in, right? In terms of how I see it, moving forward with the advent of AI, my belief is that this sort of digitization is going to happen, and it's going to accelerate as we move forward, right? So if you take the hospital ecosystem, there is consolidation happening, and consolidation typically leads to more corporate governance and then technology playing a big part. So hospital digitization is going to accelerate significantly. Patients are going to want their data on an app, all their prescription data, all their reports, so on and so forth. And that is something we support as well. We have a patient app where patient records automatically show up, and it's very secure, right? So what's going to happen is hospitals are going to be digitized, doctors are going to be digitized, patients are going to be digitized, and that's going to significantly elevate the role that AI plays in delivering health outcomes, right? Because now we can combine the data at the doctor's end with patient data. They could be capturing data at home, med devices, sugar tests that they take at home. So all of that can start to come to one place, of course, in the patient's phone, the wallet, but also with the doctor, to then make AI even more powerful in delivering good outcome, right? So that's sort of how we see it. The acceleration of digitization on all the three stakeholders: doctors, hospitals, and patients, and then the AI role playing an important role on top of it.
Right. I think as we look ahead, the future of AI in healthcare holds even more promise. And I think it's not just about making healthcare more efficient, it's about making it more personalized, precise, and even proactive. And I think this paves the way for developing new therapies, particularly in complex diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer. And I think over the years, if when we see AI technologies continue to evolve, the healthcare industry especially is poised to deliver better outcomes for patients worldwide. Well, thank you so much, Chaitanya. It was a pleasure having you with us on a podcast today. And thank you for helping us understand and discussing that how AI is proving to be a game changer in healthcare, how it is changing treatment planning, disease screening, even reducing administrative burdens and improving precision diagnosis. And like you said, I think the future of AI in healthcare is incredibly bright, and with advancements that promise to reshape how we approach everything, whether it's patient care or drug discovery. I think we'll be living in a more health focused world since then. Thank you so much for your time and effort, Chaitanya, and it was lovely chatting with you.
Same here, Priya. It was lovely chatting with you. Happy to be, have this opportunity to share the HealthPlix story with you all. Thanks for it.
Thank you so much, Chaitanya. So, this is for our listeners. Thank you for joining me on this episode today of Analytics Insight podcast. If you enjoyed today's discussion, of course, don't forget to subscribe, spread it along your network, and you know, stay tuned for more deep dives into technologies that are transforming industries. Until next time, stay informed and stay healthy. You can view all our previous podcasts on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.